you're not going to get a princess confessing all ever again. That was a unique occurrence. I would call it the Buzz Aldrin theory, where you're the second man to stand on the moon. What do you do after that?
Andrew Morton, thank you very much for speaking to me on Times Radio. If I can start just by taking you back to that biography of Diana, Princess of Wales. What memories for you does writing that book elicit?
Well, a whole cascade of memories, really. When I think back to writing Diana's biography, Diana, her true story, some 32 years ago now, it was a question of keeping the story secret, a question of finding authenticity and accuracy, and making sure that the book was absolutely correct, because you knew that there was going to be a storm of criticism and a whirlwind of abuse, and so it proved.
When you first met Dr. James Colthurst, the go-between, did you know immediately that this was going to be the reliable source, the go-between?
I first met James at St Thomas's Hospital, where Diana opened some kind of new unit, and he showed around. And I saw him afterwards for a cup of tea, and he was chatty, which is very different to most of Diana's friends. And we got on very well, and we started to play squash together at St Thomas's in the recreation area. And the last thing on the menu was talking about Diana, ironically, but he too was just reconnecting with Diana herself, and he was being let into some aspects of her life, the kind of the dislocation between the life she was leading ostensibly in public and the life she was leading in private. And from time to time, I'd get little nuggets of information, and I realised that I was being tested for my trustworthiness.
As in, did those nuggets of information suddenly find their way into the press? And if they didn't, then perhaps you were a source or somebody who could be trusted by the Princess of Wales.
Yes, I mean, exactly. What I realised is that Diana was testing me. She knew I was writing a biography about her anyway, and she was testing me. And she told James, for example, about the fact that the then Prince Charles, his private secretary, had been let go, and that was a story that I sent to the Sunday Times, and ironically, Diana was thrilled because it was something that she had control over, and she'd never done it before. So, it always makes me laugh when people say, "Oh, she was a great manipulator of the press." It wasn't that at all. In the beginning, she didn't really know what to do. She was casting around for a suitable conduit.
When we think about the methods that you used and how you cultivated that contact and how you built that trust, and then built enough material, came across enough material from those letters and those correspondence to write a book, that, from my recollection, hadn't been done in sort of for a modern biography. How did your editors feel about it? Were they questioning? Were they supportive, or were there those who sort of scratched their heads and said to you, Andrew, are you sure about this?
Well, the editor was my publisher, Michael O'Mara. He personally took control of the whole project because secrecy was the number one priority. And I remember when I first went to see him to tell him this extraordinary story of Diana, this lady called Camilla Parker Bowles, this eating disorder called bulimia nervosa, the sense of unhappiness and desperation inside Kensington Palace. uh, I remember he sucked on his cigar, looked at all the royal books that he'd published, and said, if Diana was so unhappy, how come she's always smiling in the pictures? And this was essentially the issue. I was swimming up straight against the current, really, that Diana and Charles were seen as the fairy tale marriage, the fairy tale couple, and any kind of rumours of marital discord were just simply dismissed as, tabloid tittle tattle.
What changed it for him?
When he
When did he,
listened to
when he started to say, actually, there's something to this.
what changed it for him was when he listened to the Diana speaking on the tape. James came to the office, played a few extracts of a tape recording, and Mike was totally convinced that this was the real deal, and my job was to prove it, because we couldn't just rely on Diana's words.
And how did you go about that?
I went about it by contacting her friends and her circle, some of whom were kind of brief beforehand. Yes, you can speak to him, he's reliable. Others, it was down to them, their decisions. So people like Charles Spencer, Diana's brother, he spoke to me specifically on their childhood, no further. And other friends spoke in similar fashion, whereby there were certain areas which were off limits. So it's a question of building up a kind of a jigsaw puzzle of her life.
It's the most incredible story, isn't it? I mean, it's just, you never really, I can't think of anything in the modern era that sort of compares to and I'm slightly in awe of it, if I'm honest with you, that compares to sort of the amount of work, hard graft it takes to build out this picture about this woman that everybody in the world is obsessed by, to build up this and to create this novel.
I mean, I've called it, it's very much old-fashioned journalism, where you build up a contact who usually becomes a friend, and and there's a kind of a exchange going on to everybody's mutual benefit, and that's how you get basically off diary stories. No phones were tapped in the making of this book.
Because there was no phone conversations to tap.
No. And when people criticize it and said, oh, she was basically duped into doing these interviews, well, that wasn't the case at all. I mean, she was a very active, enthusiastic, and willing participant in this process, which lasted, by the way, not just for 20 minutes or so, but for well over 2 or 3 years.
You have quite
even after the book came out, we were still talking to her about her writing speeches and her future policy with regards to where does her life go after the separation.
Did you stay in contact with her all the way through to 1997?
Not through to 1997. I went off and in the mid 1990s, before the Bashir interview, and I was writing a book on the president of Kenya. Would you believe? Which was a very different experience.
Did you, obviously this was quite early on in your career, did you find it quite hard to emulate? Or
I was an overnight sensation, having written.
You were an overnight sensation, but how do you get back to that, or do you just accept that you are the overnight sensation, you enjoy it for what it is, and it becomes almost impossible to recreate?
Yeah, you have to. It's you're not going to get a princess confessing all ever again. That was a unique occurrence. I would call it the Buzz Aldrin theory, where you're the second man to stand on the moon. What do you do after that? You go into different areas, and that's what I did. I actually tried my hand at writing about an African President Daniel Moy of
And how did
Kensington.
that compare? Was that, do you mind me asking whether that was a sort of distant second?
Well, it was a totally different kind of book, but it was just an interesting intellectual exercise to see how that to see to explore the limits of your ignorance.
Just moving on very briefly, Andrew, when you look at the royal family now and you look at the split with Harry basing himself in the United States and knowing the Princess of Wales as you did, Diana, the Princess of Wales as you did, what do you think her view would be? What would be her feelings about what's happened between the two brothers?
Well,
There's
absolutely no question at all in my mind that she would have been very upset and would have worked towards a reconciliation between them. And I think Harry himself has said that if his mother had been alive, things might have been different. And uh, Diana always said to me, and she was quite clear about this, that she anticipated Harry as being, as it were, William's wingman, but not a hitman. As far as she was concerned, he was there to support uh, the future Prince of Wales.
Do you think she saw what's happening?
Well, no, she didn't see what was happening.
No, but I mean, in terms of, so what I mean is, in terms of, could she see? Do you think she could foresee the tensions that would exist between the two brothers?
No, far from it. I mean, we've all seen with our own eyes the affection and the friendship that these two brothers had before it all went wrong, and the kind of joshing, the competitiveness. I mean, Harry went down the same road as other spares. It's not the first time this has happened. Princess Margaret, for example, was the spare to Her Majesty the late Queen. Um, uh, Duke of York, who later became George VI, was a spare to the Duke of Windsor or Edward VIII. So it's not a unusual thing for there to be a spare and to come to terms with the fact that they're always in the shadow of their big brother or big sister.
Do you think Harry's failed to do that?
Well, he's misunderstood the difference between popularity and position, and uh, his his position is as number two to his brother, and will always be like that. And he may have been more for a time more popular when he and Meghan first strode out together, but popularity changes.
And just a final question on this: do you think Harry's turning 40 next month? Do you think there is a chance of a reconciliation at any point in the future, or do you think, as you were saying, the road of the spares is a well-worn one, that the die is cast?
I think that Harry and Meghan have worked out a life together. They uh, have their own agenda and they have their own causes, and I don't see any movement whatsoever towards a reconciliation. And it's very much in the same kind of pattern as George VI and his brother Duke of Windsor. They didn't see each other much, and there were a lot of raw edges to the relationship. And whether there's any kind of reconciliation or not. And the first rule of royal reporting is never say never. But I would say that it's been a few years now, and I would say that they've got an established pattern in their lives. And if any year could have brought about a reconciliation with the king suffering from cancer, and we all know about Kate and her medical problems. This would be the year to have done it, but there's obviously been no movement in that regard.